What's up, everyone? I'm your host, Coach Joe Strong, here to bring you another great episode of the Business of Strength podcast, where you can hear the interviews, tips, and tools to turn your passion for strength into a profitable business you will love. Do not forget our next 2-day workshop, Marketing Your Gym, is May 9th and 10th, right here at Varsity House HQ in New York. We will give you the lockdown gym marketing blueprint. This is going to be an awesome event. We're niching down to one idea, 2 full days of marketing, everything you need from creating your brand and your brand strategy to how to use email and social media to leverage your ideal clients, how to develop a long-lasting joint venture relationships with local businesses, how to secure your defense with referrals, reactivations, and upgrades, and so much more. We're going to give you everything we got on marketing in 2 days. It's going to be awesome right here. You can click the link in the show notes. Go to businessofstrength.com. Attend a 2-day workshop today. It will be the best money you spent. We have another one in November, going to be selling your gym, all sales workshops, and so forth. This is going to be awesome. In this episode, I'm chatting with my new gym BFF, a guy I've known for years. We've circled around each other. It's amazing how, as you age and grow in business, the circles tend to get more and more intertwined. They get smaller and smaller and smaller. You start running into the same people over and over again. And one of those guys is Andy McCloy of BCI Performance and Fitness in Alabama. He's one of the OG Super Connector gym owners, super successful guy, very smart and switched on. We talk a lot about his background. Never went to college, totally self-educated, started going to masterminds when he was 19 years old, never looked back. And now he's looking to scale his business into the next 2 decades, for the next 20 years, and what that looks like. Andy and I are similar age, come up along a lot of the same people, following the same people, going in the same paths and so forth. I've known of Andy for years, and more recently, in the last year or so, we've connected a lot more and we got to spend some time together a few weeks ago in Orlando at a workshop. And it was great. It was great to chat. It was like we were old friends and, telling war stories about, the old days of killing ourselves in the gym and such. Very similar background, coming from primarily sports performance and then transitioning to a hybrid model of sports performance and fitness at BCI. And now looking to expand, maybe buy a building, build another gym, some smaller micro style gyms like we're doing and so forth. So great guy, super sharp, connected to everybody, has literally been to every major mastermind that you could think of, from Ryan Lee to Alan Cosgrove to Pat Rigsby to Vince Gabriel to Bedros Keuilian to you name it. He's tied in big with the Luka Hosevars, the Joel Jamesons of the world. He's a really, really sharp strength and conditioning coach as well as businessman. So listen the F up. He's got some great things to say. Talk a little bit about how the street game's on fire, how using masterminds really unlocked his full potential. He's going to give you some quick hitters. Pay attention when he's talking about marketing for his athletes and his adults. He's got some really cool things going on there, and some that you might be seeing us be rolling with at Varsity House here in the near future. He's got some tough words for young coaches that they need to hear. Listen up, Buttercup, he says, and what are some of the critical characteristics of success? And you can listen to me and Andy tell some good old war stories about the '90s days of strength and conditioning, bodybuilding, and things like that, and kind of some of the cool stuff that we were into that got us into the realm of strength. I mean, this was such a great era, the '90s. Anybody who's in their 40s now, that grew up as a strength practitioner, in my opinion, kind of like '90s hip hop, right? It's kind of like '90s hip hop, '90s Knicks basketball, right? It was the heyday of strength, in my personal opinion. With the great bodybuilders of the world, the battles between Lee Haney and Dorian Yates and such, and it was just a great, great time to be a practitioner of strength, or to be growing up in strength. So get dialed in. We're here with Andy McCloy of BCI in Alabama. Take it away. This is the Business of Strength. All right, I'm here with Andy McCloy, and I'm super pumped to chat with you. We've had a lot of great conversations over the last probably about 2 years or so, we've kind of poked around and kind of floated around each other's circles for a little while. About a year ago, Andy and I started reaching out to each other a little bit more frequently, just through business connections and like common friendships and people that we knew. And our circles just kind of, like all things, right? You kind of start, when you have like-minded individuals, you'll kind of start running into the same people a little bit more frequently, and all of a sudden, our circles started getting a little closer. We started chatting a little more, and that culminated a few weeks ago. Down in Orlando, we were chatting. We were at Vince Gabriel's mastermind. Got to spend a bunch of time together and had some great conversations. So I was really excited to get Andy on the podcast because I followed you for a long time, man. So thanks for taking a minute to sit and chat with me and have some conversations about our businesses and try to level up the industry a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, man, my pleasure. And I mean, to your point about there's less than 6 degrees of separation in this industry, I think. So like your circles can easily collide if you know what you're doing, and I've had a lot of respect for what you guys are doing for a while now. So I appreciate you having me on.
Thanks, man. Awesome. So obviously, Andy, there's a lot of people in our circles. You've been around a long time, and you're one of those guys that, I quickly realized is, one of those super connectors. You remind me a lot of my friend Zach, who like, we'll every time we're talking about somebody or someplace, you're like, oh yeah, I know him really well. Or, oh yeah, that's my boy. Oh yeah, I'm good friends with them, right? So, and as we got to talk, we talk, it's obvious to me that you've spent an extensive amount of time, energy, and money on your own personal development. Talk to me a little bit about your journey. What got you to be, what made fitness the thing? And then, from that, how did, getting out, networking, and growing your skill set and personal development really become something that now is like, I think like it's a cornerstone of your existence in a sense?
Yeah, I think it's kind of my superpower at this point. So I think all this really started for me because I got into this industry out of survival, and that's probably the best way I can explain it. I've told my story a bunch, but it's worth rehashing a little bit. I had my first kid at 16 years old. 17 years old, I was on my own. 21 years old, I moved to the state of Alabama from Maryland, and I just kind of arrogantly started a business because of an experience I had working for a guy in the Washington, D.C. area that had a similar background to me, and he had found some success in his life. And at that stage of my life, I moved away from Maryland because I just kind of realized like I'm going to prison or I'm going to get killed. Like that was kind of the reckless nature of the way I was living. And I moved out there with this aspiration to start a gym. And once I got into it, I realized like, well, this isn't as easy as I thought. There's a lot more I need to know, right? So honestly, like I started a personal development journey probably before I got really deep into strength and conditioning. Mm-hmm. I've told a story before where, I'm living in the projects down in Indian Head, Maryland. Earlier that day, I was working in Greenbelt, Maryland at a Gold's Gym. And a lady that I had been working with comes to me, and basically she was just having a great day. And I noticed her energy was different. She told me about a seminar that she had went to. And I just thought it was, okay, cool. We said our goodbyes. And I went out in the gym to work with this boxer, this guy, Bujay White, who was teaching me actually how to jump rope like a professional. So about a couple minutes into me screwing up jumping rope, this lady comes walking back in with a yellow bag with a book in it. And was like, hey, look, I just thought I had to buy this for you. That book happened to be Tony Robbins' Awaken the Giant Within. Mm-hmm. And I literally took it and threw it in my bag. I didn't really have much of an intention to read it. And I'm young at this point. I've had enough head trauma to where I'm tired of like trying to come up with years and dates. I feel like I always screw that up. So we'll just say I was young. It was somewhere between 17 and 20 probably. So I get home, the girl I'm living with at this time, I've got a child with her. We're not super connected. So I had many lonely nights when I returned from the gym. And that night I'm sitting on the floor with my back against my couch, drinking a 40 of Old English, because I had great taste in them.
I used to put the lemons in. You got to put a little lemon in there.
I wasn't that fancy. I just guzzled it. But as I was sitting there, I noticed this, the yellow bag sitting on my table. And I went over and I grabbed it and I opened it up and I started reading it. And it's like in that moment, that book changed my life because it it gave me perspective on what was required to change my life, which I really kind of had thought I was doomed to this way of living. Just what everybody told me. You have a kid at 16 years old. People have a lot of really strong opinions. And that led me deep into Tony Robbins. I read Awaken the Giant Within. I went back and read Unleash the Power, Unleash the Power, I believe is what it's called. Mm-hmm. Anyway, another one of Tony's books. And that really started becoming kind of the backbone of how I was working on myself. That carried into when I moved to Alabama and I started working as a trainer. And I got into like Brian Tracy and a couple other personal development guys. And that really started giving me an idea of like, well, how can I differentiate myself amongst other trainers? And it was like, well, if I have an understanding of behavior change, values, questions, if I could learn how to leverage that in the training process, that would be a unique differentiator. That was the thought process at that time. Coupled with some mentors that continued to push me in that direction because they knew my backstory. They knew I needed to have a better understanding of the choices I'd made in my past and what I needed to do to overcome those things as an adult. So because that was so impactful for me, that sent me deep down the continuing education rabbit hole of all things training, going back to like the old Charlie Francis board, the super training board. Yeah. I really got lucky through kind of connections in powerlifting to get put on to Westside and lead FDS real early, as well as Charlie Francis. And that really helped me. And I started to notice these kind of common names that would be on these boards. And this is when the internet was kind of just like a thing. And I started really looking.
Right, it was like forums back then. You had like strengthcoach.com forum. Remember those?
Yes.
Like
six-figure trainers,
Ryan Lee, six-figure. Yes,
Lee,
exactly. Yep.
So I was on all that stuff. So yeah, that's the era.
Me too.
I love talking to somebody my age because you actually know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Ryan Lee was like he was the GOAT. He was the OG of it all.
Well, I'll have to tell you a funny story about that because I was stupid on that one, but I'll get to that.
He got thrown off. He got thrown off of that one.
Yeah, I mean, I'll segue into that real quick. When I first saw Ron, I was like, he's teaching all these bad trainers. You know, I was a judgmental young asshole. Sorry for the language.
Yeah,
that's unacceptable in business strength. But and I just was like, all these guys are going to learn marketing. They don't even know training. But that was really more indicative of like my own judgments of myself. I didn't know that much about training. I probably knew more than most people, but nothing like I do now. And but I look back on that
shit, dude.
We all do it, right? It's human. But I look back on that time, and it's like now, you know, the guys that I know that went to that event are like Luca, Eric Cressy, you know, Mike Robertson, Vince went, you know, Pat Rigsby, all these, you know, brilliant. Yeah. So I was stupid on that one. But what I was very good at is finding training resources and the people that were really good. And I just started driving to people's gyms. You know, I think I went to Joe DeFranco's in like 2004, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And just went to a bunch of people's gyms. And that was important to me because I kind of needed, this sounds a little arrogant, but I kind of needed to measure myself and be like, all right, these guys are humans. You know, I recognize them from the internet, but these guys are human. You know, they're just like me. And then we could talk shop. And I had a way of like evaluating my understanding of training concepts. So that was really valuable to me, and it planted in my mind this importance of constant and never-ending improvement, you know, which I now equate to Kaizen, which is one of my personal values, one of our company values, and it's something I've really leaned on. And I guess, you know, I always say that my ability to make friends with people probably comes from my mom because I never saw her enter a room where everybody in the room didn't just love talking to her. And my dad, on the other hand, is a very quiet, subdued, doesn't talk a lot. So I'm a little bit more like my mom in that way. I like to talk a lot. But that helps form bonding capital because I'm just genuinely interested in people, you know, and that helped me a lot. You know, it has become a part of my life and who I am. And it's the number one thing that I lean on these days to grow my business, because if I don't know the answer to something, I know who does. And I'm willing to pay for their time, money, expertise, in order to move things forward, as opposed to, you know, really trying to figure out how to do it on my own. When Who Not How first came out, I read the book and I was like, well, you know, that doesn't really make as much sense as everybody says. But then as I started thinking about it, it's actually what I've done. Instead of me always trying to figure things out on my own, it's like, well, who knows what I need to know? And let me go figure that out.
I just did another podcast right before hopping on with you, just a solo podcast. Our very first podcast was operational freedom, how to create the systems to free yourself from the day-to-day, right? and that's like the very first podcast on the business of strength. I did a 2.0 version an hour ago on operational freedom 2.0, how to delegate your way out of, your way to doing nothing really. And I think that, developing employees, delegating and give people opportunity, responsibility, ownership over things is the greatest superpower in business, right? You can't do everything yourself. And the more I see gym owners and any small business with an owner or manager that's like holding on to things or micromanaging people and really like, focusing on the minutia, as we like to say at RCS, stepping over dollars to pick up nickels, right?
Yeah.
You really wind up hampering your business, yourself, and your own ability to grow. I think growth comes from letting go. Growth comes from letting people that might not be quite as good at you in one area yet. I use the quotes yet. And allowing them the opportunity to fail forward and get good, right? And I always think back to like, the first time that Big Mike came to me and was like, hey, I can do the programming for all the high school and junior high school kids, and you could just focus on the college and the pro athletes. And I was like, oh man, like he's gonna screw this all up. Like, what if it's no good? And all this head trash pops in there. And ultimately, I did it, and Mike took over. And you know what? It was awesome, and he's done awesome. And you fast forward 15 years later, the guy's still doing it, crushing it for me. He's a phenomenal guy. But if I never gave him that opportunity, he might be out on the streets, and he may just say, "Screw these guys! Like it's not what I want it to be," and leave. So I think, like when you said go into all these things, at least it kind of sounded like it did the same thing for you as it did for me. It just the first one I ever went to was a Pat Rigsby event. And I was in a room full of other people, and there was several gyms in there. Now this is going back to like 2010, 2011, and there was a few 7-figure gyms in there. There was a couple guys who were already doing $1 million plus, and that was like unheard of back then. And
Right.
And for me, I remember Dan and I leaving feeling the most deflated we've ever been because we sucked. Right.
I know that feeling.
Yeah.
I know that feeling.
But high-fiving the whole plane ride home, because we were like, these guys are just flesh and blood like me and you, dude. There's no secret sauce. There's no magic pixie dust. They're not some super genius. They're not Elon Musk. They're not Albert Einsteins of the world. They're just regular dudes who they literally educated themselves to putting the pieces to the puzzle together. And they were a few years ahead of us. They were a few years, a few moves, and a few who's, as we like to say, ahead of us, right? They had a Rolodex that we didn't yet have. Like you said, now I can call people who I know are better than me in lots of different areas. So again, if I need a digital guy, it's like, hey, I'm going to call this guy. If I need an ads guy, I'm going to call this guy. If I know somebody who's crushing athletes at a better level, it's like, I'm going to call Andy and see what he's doing down there, right? So I think that's really been the for us when we got home. We were just like, yo, man, if they can do this shit, we can do this shit. We're straight Jersey. He's like, those guys are from Florida. They don't know how to work hard. Right. A bunch of bums down there. Yeah. So that's great, man. So what's been like, now, obviously you're still doing it. So, we're out, a couple weeks ago at an event, and, you're learning and educating. What still drives you today? Like, what are you looking for right now? What are the pieces of the puzzles that you're looking for right now as a seasoned veteran with a very mature business that's doing well, that's done well for quite some time, right?
Yeah.
What's missing right now, and what's Andy McCloy looking for in terms of knowledge, connections, the Rolodex? What is it that you're looking for?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that I found is I was starting to kind of build fortresses around myself to a degree. I was only communicating with kind of like some really good friends of mine in this industry, but I wasn't getting around other guys that I respected, who I knew about, and who were kind of doing the thing that I see as being next for me. And because I've had a long-standing relationship with Vince and guys like you, Mark, Connor, Devin, guys that I've known a long time that are just really brilliant guys and doing things at a high level, I just hadn't connected with. Like, we had never met in person, even though I knew Connor and Devin for a long time, but like we hadn't met in person and connected. I'd heard great things about Dan and I just wanted to get back in an environment where there were other guys doing big things, because a lot of my friends in the industry, it's kind of weird. Not that they're not business owners, but they are damn near influencers. I mean, they're so well known,
like super trainer influencers and stuff like that.
Right? Yeah. So that's a lot of my friend group. And while some of them own gyms,
and for those listening, like Andy could name drop like literally a list of like the greatest strength and conditioning, coaches in the world, as like close personal friends. But again, like you said, like that's great when you need X's and O's in training, but they're not, in a sense, running multiple brick and mortar facilities and so forth.
Yeah, or just the nature of their influence doesn't require them to run a brick and mortar gym the way me and you might have. So I wanted to get around guys that were like really, they were essentially operationally irrelevant, right? They were sitting in that visionary seat. They were delegating and guiding their team, which is the role that I sit in my company. But I've wanted to open more locations. There's 2 or 3 cities nearby that I want to open gyms in, and I want to own North Alabama when it comes to sport performance and training. And there was enough evidence that you guys do really well, and all the other guys I mentioned. And I wanted to reconnect, so it's again about like finding the people that are where you want to be, doing things that you want to do, or that help fill in knowledge gaps. Like there's a lot. Listen, man, I know a lot of stuff. I've been doing this for a really long time, but I know I have blind spots. I know that there are things I don't know. So I would much rather get in a room with guys that have already answered some of those questions and, leverage their expertise to my benefit.
Yeah, I mean, look, every time I think I know something, I get slapped right in the face because, like, I think we do a phenomenal job with our marketing. And, like, I go to an event where, like, I've heard, let's call it probably 98% of everything that was said in those 2 days, I've heard in some capacity. But that 2%, 1 or 2 things that popped out, and I was like, damn, how did I not think of that? And it's like, what the? It's always this thing that's so simple. It slaps you in the face. And just like little things like a great little onboarding tactic and, something so simple as, lowering your attrition through, giving a diploma to people in their first 30 days, something a la like Joe Hashey does, right? He does, in my opinion, he's probably the best in the country at the intra communication and the client community stuff that he does. And it's like, man, there's 2 or 3 things there that I think would just win clients over in such a way that they would be like literally hard pressed to ever leave. Because no small, forget gym, no small business anywhere is going above and beyond for their customers like that. Right. So little things like that. So I'm always super humbled by things like that. And I love when I meet somebody who's my favorite thing about going to those types of events and when I see, and maybe you'll say the same thing, Andy, is like, I love when I see that young Joe or Andy from like 2006 who comes running up to me. Now I'm nobody, right? Like again, like I'm no super like influencer celebrity guy, but like, yeah, exactly. But like, people come up to me and they know us or they know our brand. They're like, oh my God, you're Coach Joe. I've been wanting to meet you for a long time. And they're super excited, not only to meet us, but to tell me all about their gym or something they're doing, right?
Yep.
And I love it when I see that excitement because that gets me so fired up, right? To just see that, like, I remember there was nothing, like the moment that day that Dan and I signed our operating agreement on a fucking napkin at the bar, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was like literally like one of the greatest moments of my life, when I look back on shit like that. So I think I put myself in their shoes of how excited they are to have their new gym. They got this thing, they're doing it, their wives and kids are involved a lot of times. And I'll tell you, I learned so much from them because some of these young bucks that are coming in, the ones that are like, early 20s, the one advantage that they have over us, Andy, is that they grew up with technology. We did not. So some of these guys are real savvy when it comes to like the automations, the marketing, the usage of technology within their business. So, I get fired up. Yeah. So what is next? I mean, is the plan to open up more gyms?
Yeah. I mean, right now I'm in negotiations for a building. I mean, the big thing for me, it was always to own a corporate piece of real estate. That was a big thing for me. The building that I'm in now, I've been in for over a decade. There's been a couple times it went up for sale that it was just a little out of reach. I'd have to bring in partners. But there's a building right now I'm working that is within reach. I will say the negotiation's not going as awesome as I wished. And as you know, when you're trying to do big things, it forces a lot of reflection. And if this doesn't go down, we'll be just fine, and we'll just focus back on home base. But what's next for me is to open gyms in these kind of ancillary communities to where I'm at right now. I'm in a really unique area where most of these areas have expendable income. And while we're kind of an athlete city, the periphery of where I'm at has a ton of great athletes as well. And being in the state of Alabama, I mean, if it wasn't for Mississippi, we'd be the fattest state in the union. And I think there's a lot of good work that can also be done on the adult side.
Sure.
Since we prioritized that going on, I guess, probably 8 years ago, we started making it a big priority. We had started before then, but it was like, you know what, man, like I'm unwilling to accept that CrossFit is the best product available for adults. I'm unwilling to accept that Orange Theory or F45 is ideal. And that's not to say anything bad about those fitness modalities. I just believe that we could do a better job. We could create a competitive product that had significant advantages over those methods. So we really pushed in on that, and we've grown that. And while we are known all over really the state for working with athletes, we're starting to shift that. And I'm very proud of our adult program. So we want to continue to expand our influence in the adult fitness market too, because I've always had this idea, like if we can affect a kid, right, and get him to start caring about his health and fitness and food and sleep, maybe that'll trickle up, right? But if we've got mom and dad and we've got the kid, there's no way we're not making an impact on that family. And if you make a big enough impact on a family, you start to influence their peer group. And then that starts to influence their peer group. And then all of a sudden, you're starting to make a really big impact in a community or a county. And, maybe it's a little altruistic, but, my goal is to really run the best gym in the state of Alabama. And I believe we are the best, but we want to continue to be impact focused, both on athletes and adults moving forward.
Yeah. I mean, is there, it's kind of a natural shift, right? I mean, just about every guy I've spoken to, we kind of all, or at least a lot of us, got attracted to the sexy of training athletes pretty early on in our careers. And that is, and I still love it. And it's funny how at some point we mature as business owners and individuals. And we also, I think a lot of it does have to do with maturing, like physically in age. Like, I think there's some imposter syndrome that happens with our young 20-something trainers that are training 40 to 60-year-old adults and don't really know how to connect and converse with them in a way that would be conducive in the same way that we do in the conversations that we have about, whether it's families, lifestyle, longevity, our thought processes are definitely different. But as once I crossed into my 30s or mid 30s, it was easy for me to relate, or easier to relate. And I started naturally attracting more of that, I think, too. So what now, specifically talking business, like what would you say in terms of the revenue split? Like, you don't have to give me exact numbers, but in terms of percentages, like what does the business look like now in terms of percentage athletes versus adults?
We're still like 60-40 athlete to adult, but we are closing the gap fast. I mean, we're really intentionally closing that gap. We have so much kind of relevance in the market for athletes. We don't have to do a lot to keep 150-ish athletes kind of year round, just by the way we sell. And again, I think just the market presence we have helps a lot.
It's kind of built into your brand,
it's
kind of what you did.
Yeah. It just rolls over. I mean, so what's really crazy is now I've got probably 10 guys in my gym who are 35 years old in my adult program that I started training when they were like 13. So it's like it really comes full circle then, because when those guys think about a place they want to train, they think about us. But almost all of our marketing efforts really are now centered around the adult fitness population. Instead of me trying to address two different, how it is. It's two businesses inside of one, essentially.
Yes.
And because we wanted to intentionally grow the adult side, we said, look, let's put a pause on marketing for athletes. We're going to be fine there. We're not worried about it. Let's drive the majority of our efforts into adult training. And that's been a really good thing for me. And to your point about as you grow, so I think when you're in your 20s, who you choose to work with is very much an ego game. It's who you think
a
has
bazillion%.
social.
Bazillion%.
I mean, you know how it was. You're my age. Early 2000s, sport performance training was doing this, man. It was taking off, but there wasn't a lot of people out there doing it. So I was like, oh, this can be my thing, combined with, the personal development stuff, everything I talked about. But as I got older, I got full custody of my daughter when she turned 13. And I realized I'd spent really the last 10 years taking care of other people's kids more than mine. And I started to reflect on.
That's a powerful motivator.
Yeah. I started to reflect on my role in the business and how that needed to change. And without me being the driving force of athletes, kind of the gap that would create. And I felt it would be better for me to hire coaches and create a product for adults than hope that I would somehow get somebody on my staff and team that could do what I did in the athlete realm. So that was really kind of how all that played out now, and where we are from like athletes to adults. It's just adults are more of our focus, but we're certainly not, letting up on training athletes as well. Shit, we signed up 3 different teams this week.
Right.
Yeah.
And what was the reason to shift to adults, like most of us, cash flow stability, long-term growth process, obviously, saving on marketing BTUs is a big thing, because obviously marketing to athletes, cost per lead's way higher and attrition's way higher for athletes, as a whole, as a general whole. Each individual shop might be a little bit, but and not that you're losing athletes, just that the cyclical nature of them coming in and out of sports makes for more attrition throughout the year. Were those some of the reasons where you saw like, hey, the longevity of this business, the next 20 years for Andy and our company means that we have to stabilize this thing a little bit differently?
I mean, yes and no. Not to say there's no truth to that, but one of the things that we've had working in our favor is I've always took the position from a sales standpoint that I'm going to sell you into the program that allows me to help you best. And I've done face-to-face sales consultations for 20 years. So we sell a 12-month program as our number one offer, and then we will downsell to a 3-month that's more seasonal. So when I was coaching, 90-some%.
So you're telling you sell. So I come in as an athlete, or I bring my son in. We bring a little Antonio in, and we're talking about year-round youth athletic development. You're gonna sell me into a 12-month program that accounts for his seasons, time in and out, switching between maybe a more intensive off season 3 or 4 times a week to a less intensive in season 1 or 2 times a week.
That's exactly it. We call it in season, off season split. And we actually give parents the ability, because we don't want to have to send out emails to remind you your season's coming up, but we do a lot of education here. Whereas whenever a parent wants to downgrade to the in-season frequency, which is 1 to 2 days a week for us, they can do that just with an email they send in. We'll then downgrade them to the in-season package. And we recommend, if they're in the off-season, most athletes are seeing this 3 to 4 times. And educating parents on that, how to use a general to specific continuum of efforts from a planning perspective, how to integrate SPP work, which it's a little bit of I'm playing with that word a bit in regards to traditional strength and conditioning, but we look at it as all the technical, the hitting and the pitching and the 7-on-7 stuff. So in that initial consult, we try to frame that up for everybody and teach them how to use our program year round. Because intermittent training, as you know, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, despite the market kind of moving in that direction.
It's generally a waste of money for most families, because they lose everything in a couple months after stopping. So
when they come in with kind of an idea that little Johnny's not going to stick to a year, and they'll say it in front of him, I just need to see if he's going to do this or not. So, well, you literally just gave the kid an out. Like if it was like, Johnny, you're going to do this, and you're going to be committed, and then we hold him accouable to that.
We probably would have been made way more money, Andy, if we would have just been child psychiatrists, right? Because at this point, we're probably more qualified than most.
Yeah, I mean, literally just like working with other parents on helping their kids has taught me a lot of things to do and not to do, with my own kid. So the nature of how we sold our program has helped us keep athletes year round. And then when I really quit doing the training, that got a lot harder though. because it wasn't me people were working with. Now, that's not to say anything negative or disparaging about my staff. They're absolutely phenomenal. But I do kind of have a name in my area, and people were a little less likely to jump on for a year. So now we sell probably more 3-month memberships than ever. But we still start top down. With all of my integrity, I know I can help a kid more if they give me an entire year, and I'll help them figure out how to do that. It does require.
And is there a different price point? Like if they just want the short term thing, it's a little bit more expensive.
Yep, exactly. That's how we incentivize. Is we do give them a little bit of discount for the 12-month, and it requires a little bit more salesmanship. But when I know there's probably some coach listening to this and like, oh, I don't want to be a salesman. It's like, well, get over it. But I'm not really talking like hard pressure sales. It's educating and prescribing. This is the problem you said you have. This is how I believe we can solve your problem. This is the commitment required. Let's make it happen, right? And there's a bunch of different ways to do that, but
yeah,
we've landed on a pretty solid way of doing that.
I probably had the worst case of sales aversion as a young trainer when I was in my early 20s. I come from very low, I wouldn't even say lower middle class, low class, but like Rodney Dangerfield, we got a lot of class. It's just all low, right? You know, I come from pretty, single mom, pretty dirt poor, almost losing our home a bunch of times for taxes and things like that. And I think my aversion to selling people at the time, $50, $60, $80 an hour training sessions was just like, I would never pay for this shit, right? And it really wasn't until I was in business for 3 or 4 years and struggling with sales still. I was doing a great job as a coach, so I was getting almost all my people by referrals. But when I'd sit somebody down, I was like a fumbling pile of mess. And I just remember going out to Pat, and Pat, I was there for a specific sales conference, and Pat says with his Kentucky drawl, right? Pat listens to the podcast now and always pings me when he hears it. He's like, "Why are you always doing my voice?" Right? And he's like, but he says to me, he's like, "Joe, do you believe in what you do?" He's like, "Are you good at what you do?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I've studied really hard. I've got a master's degree. I've been to West Side, internships with Mark Verstegen. Like I'm doing it, right?" And he's like, "All right." So he's like, "Well, that's number one, is you got to be good at what you do, and you got to believe what you do." He's like, if you don't sell them, you can't help them. And he's like, it's just the way of the world. He's like bringing your car gets a flat or blow or has a bad suspension. You bring it to a mechanic. If you don't pay him, what happens to the car? I said, well, nothing. He's not going to fix it. He's like, exactly. He's like, well, think of these people. He's like, if they come to you and they don't, there's a monetary exchange. There has to be a monetary exchange in order for you to help them. And then they become a client, and now they unlock all the greatness of being a client of Joe Riggio at Varsity House. And they get all these great things that you have for them, and they get all this knowledge. And they said, your master's degree wasn't free. That didn't happen. You didn't just snap your fingers and get some magic pixie dust and all of a sudden fast forward 7 years of your life, right, to doing a master's degree. He's like, that's what people are paying for. And in that moment, it literally, like I said, we flew home from that trip, high five, and me and Dan, we were very excited that we saw other gym owners doing it at a higher level. We were like, dude, we got this. We just got to figure it out. And that was really it,
For me, it was a little different. It was very early on, because I didn't have a degree. I'd gotten a lot of trouble. There was, I had limited job opportunities. I always say, like, I'm kind of unemployable at this stage of my life. I've almost never worked for anybody else. I mean, I had a couple odd-end jobs, but I've mostly worked for myself my whole life. But I did have some good advice early on that, like, some of the highest paying jobs for people without degrees are sales. And then I ended up going to a Tom Hopkins seminar in DC at like 19 years old, 20. And I always appreciated the psychology of sales. That was the thing that kind of roped me in, was the ability to get someone to make a decision, right? Whether that's yes or no. And the importance of that if you're selling a product, because if you can't get them to identify that they have a problem, you really have no ability to close them. And you know how it is. People come in, it's like, well, what brought you in today? Oh, just checking things out, And I just was really intrigued with how to take somebody from that position and then move them really into a sales conversation and help them make a decision on, why they were here and what they really wanted out of that.
Right. Okay. Okay. I mean, like, it's amazing that at 19 you were doing that stuff. You know where I was at 19?
Yeah.
At the
Well, I was
club,
doing
at
that
the
too,
Jersey,
Joe. I was
down
doing
the
plenty.
Jersey Shore, being a complete dipshit.
Well, again, like I just had a kid at such a young
Yeah,
age. It
yeah, yeah,
flipped
yeah.
my mind to where it's like, if
Sure.
I don't earn, and I mean, listen, I was involved in
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot of stuff that, I'm not really proud of. So I was making money, but that was a very risky situation. And it was like, I
Yeah,
have
yeah.
to develop some other skill set that'll allow me to, actually make some money and take care of this kid.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I mean, for me, I was, I was personal training right away, like right out of high school. I was a year, 19, the summer I turned 19, I started training people. I exchanged my first like dollar for time and training.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of the rest is history from there. So I was training myself all through college, I was training people all through college and so forth. And, but the mastermind principle, it's funny how that happened. My very first, so when I worked for a bunch of people. I graduated with my master's. Was doing some PhD candidacy stuff, and I was thinking about going to a PhD program. I had narrowed it down to like two specific programs, and I was going to those schools to meet with the director and see, where the research was going and just kind of see what my place and role would be in those two programs. And I remember driving back from Virginia after the second visit. It was down in Old Dominion, and I just remember calling my mom, like, I'm not going back to school. I'm done with this shit. I'm going to open up a gym. And she just lost her shit, lost her mind. The fucking weightlifting shit. It's that goddamn heavy metal, isn't it? Right? I was like, no, Mom, it's not the heavy metal.
Right,
it's the gangster rap. No.
Right.
It's the Tupac did it, Mom.
That's right.
And she's losing her mind. She fucking hangs up the phone on me all mad and shit. You should be a doctor, Clint. Hangs up the phone. I call her back like an hour later to get like 5 hour ride up. I was like, can I borrow 10 grand? Fuck you. Right. Hangs up. Did not give me the money. I wound up working for a bunch of people. And I remember when I finally had the juice to open up my own shop, my mom lent me a couple dollars. My girlfriend at the time, my best friend, everybody lent me a few bucks. I opened that first gym with like shoestring. And kind of the rest is history. But I mean, like, again, for me, it was just the I didn't see that. I once you get in it, you're so entrenched in what you're doing, and like a lot of gym owners, I mean, it's like we call it the coach owner paradox. If you're good at what you do and you love coaching, you're gonna get busy, right? Yep. So within a year, I was busy, and I was doing the typical 6-7 days a week, 40-50 sessions a week. I'll say yes to everything. I got athletes, I got teams, athletes, schools were asking me to come do like a 6 a.m. training session before school. I'll do anything. I was only training athletes at the time. And I mean, something you said was like, I was, we're learning adults, man, I had such adversity. I thought I was so cool that no, I only trained athletes, right? Yep. Like I was some badass, speed and performance coach, literally like I was Charlie Francis. Coach. Oh yeah, I'm exactly trainer. I'm
a strength coach. I'm not a personal trainer.
You see that CSCS on the wall, right? And what an asshole. I think about all the money I turned away. But my first adult client was a guy named Lance Drucker, right? And Lance, still a close personal friend. I was yapping up with him yesterday, and a great guy. He had his kids training with me. He breaks me down, talks me to training. I'm like, I'm going to crush this fucking guy so bad that he's never coming back. I do that. And 18 years later, the guy's still coming. Right. But he gave me a book in my first year that he was with me, Think and Grow Rich. That shit sat on the shelves for about 3 years and I never read it. Kind of like your story. I'm in a moment of desperation. I'm graduating school. I mean, I got my business. I mean, I moved to the second thing with Dan, right? We almost go out of business. We're in our second summer. We're almost out of business again. All of our athletes are leaving for the summer, and we don't have any fall business whatsoever. Right, all football players mostly, and we're terrified we're going out of business. And I just remember picking up that book and reading the book and being like, "This is what I've been missing my whole life, not just in business, but in everything." Because I grew up without a dad. I didn't have a lot of strong mentors in my life. I had a few people that, were around me. My mom, thank God, was always my mom. I jokingly, my mom's half German. So my mom's got a little bit of that, hard ass in her, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She was always super tough on me, but also super loving. And I just remember reading that book, and I literally called Pat Rigsby the next day, and I was like, I said, we need a mastermind. We need somebody else. And after that, it was pretty much like you said, like the cliche goes, the rest is history. And I've spent, like yourself, probably several $100,000 on my own personal development, long beyond college. Like I want to make a point here, because it's something you brought up. You just said, like, I didn't have a degree, right? Here's one of the most successful gym owners in the country, folks, without a degree, and it really just a whole bunch of grit and want to, right? And he educated himself on the street by learning and going and surrounding himself with people. Here I am with a master's degree, right? And I would say the amount of knowledge that I don't use in my day to day, it far surpasses the amount of knowledge that I do use.
Yeah.
Nobody needs too much. There's not too much molecular biology going on in the gym. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always said, like, I when I was younger, I was kind of embarrassed by not having a degree, but that insecurity created this like obsession with learning, because I never wanted anybody to be like, oh, well, where'd you go to school? I wanted them to just assume that I had a degree, right? So that was really instrumental for me. And then I told somebody recently, it's like, when you were in college, doing English and math, and it's like, I'm trying to decipher super training, and it's like I had just very specialized knowledge in training and really training and sales. Like, those were the two things that I went really deep on early on in my life.
Yeah. I think I know now as an adult, I can look back prospectively on my life as a younger person at 48, the 18, 19-year-old Joe who wanted to go to college to get a degree, and, even at one point was, a hair short of going to med school. That was primarily for status and validation personally, right? Like I needed that validation. Like for me, coming from, lower socioeconomic means, kind of always being picked on for being the kid with the beater car or the shitty house or whatever. It was like, all right, I'm going to show you fuckers what's up, right? I'm going to educate the hell out of myself, and I look, and part of it is today, I'm still proud of it. And, you can never take that away from me. But again, what it does for me in my day to day, as I decided to become, a full-time business owner, that degree basically was just a nice piece of paper to hang on the wall at that point. The moment I decided to own a gym, it was like, yeah, that's great.
But I do think one of my regrets, I have two regrets: that I didn't go into the military and that I didn't do college, because I think both experiences, while vastly different, would have been really beneficial for me. One of the things that's always been a struggle for me was I didn't know how to do like normal work. Like I didn't, because I went to 3 different high schools. I kind of finessed my way through all that. No college. Like I never, ever learned how to, like, okay, this is the assignment. I'm going to, research this. I'm going to sit down and do work. And I just did not have those habits. What the habits I had was wake up at 3:45 in the morning, drive my ass to a gym, train somebody all day, go home and do that again. So when I started having to become the business owner, I realized I had pretty inadequate skill sets. And I've worked very hard to fill some of those in, but some of them, it's just like I'm so far away from it. Like my understanding of technology, I'm better than I've ever been, but I'm never going to close the gap on the average 25-year-old. So I need to hire those guys to help shadow and hide my weaknesses. But I think there's still a huge benefit of going to college, because you're being forced to sit down, study, and do work. Now, if you have poor standards and you don't put the appropriate effort into that and you finesse your way through it like I did in high school, probably not as beneficial. But I still see a tremendous benefit in that.
Me too. I mean, look, knowing what I know now about education and what you need to run a business, me and my wife talk about this a lot with our son, right? Because, again, he's only 6.5, so we got a long road ahead of us, and lots of things will change between them. But right now, Daddy's his hero, thankfully, and he's telling me every day that he wants to own a gym like Daddy. And I said, what? And he said, what? He said, when you die, do I get to take over the gym? And I said, well, well, let's hope that doesn't happen anytime soon,
Right.
because if it does, we're all in trouble. And I said, too, and you got to take out Uncle Dan too. So what are we gonna do about him? He's like, I'll kick his ass.
I love it.
I'll kick his ass. And I was like, all right, well, I said, we'll devise a plan. And I said, one day when Uncle Dan's here, we'll have to like trip him or something like that. And
That's
push
right.
him out the street or some shit, you know? But again, like what I know now, you can help influence the path a little bit to get a lot more out of it. Because I would have been a lot more attentive, knowing what I know now about masterminds, networking, and people. I would have been a lot more attentive to my network, a lot more attentive to making inroads with the professors who control the internship and cooperative education pipelines for small businesses at universities, because they guard that shit like it's the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, and so forth. So just so many things that I think of now. It's like, man, if I could go back and talk to that 19-year-old going to college, I'd be like, listen here, you dipshit. Right. Like, these are the things that matter. It ain't those chicks hanging out in the quad,
that's right,
you know, in between classes. That's for sure. It's like there'll be lots more of them if we do these 10 things first, you know.
Well, and like what you just said there, my brain just went to, I still think that problem is relevant, maybe even more relevant now, because it's so easier to get distracted as a young coach and a business owner.
Oh man.
You spend all this time, you know, doing things that I would suggest don't give you as high of an ROI as connecting with that internship person and making relationships in the community. And, you know, people are very focused now on doing all things social media, and they don't really understand that can actually be a limitation and a distraction too at times.
We've had two really young, great potential, very little work experience trainers that we thought would come in and do excellent in our system, turn down the role. And you know, man, and again, like as a business, you know, we're top 1% in terms of what we pay our people. And these were very good paying jobs with great opportunity. And both of them turned it down to work on their personal brands. And, you know, when I look at them now, this is months later, I'm seeing what they're doing. And it's a bunch of nonsense, and it's not really going to go anywhere. And it's not like, you know, to become the next Luca or Joe D or a Jen Wiederstrom, there's lots of things that have to happen other than just posting content on social media. It's not just, this is, hey gang, if you got sticky shoulders like me, here's what you do. It's like there's 15,000 people doing that a day, you know. So it's a personality, it's a vibe, it's also timing too. Like, you know, and again, I'm not taking anything away from Joe D. He's the man, right? But you look at the time when Joe, Eric Cressy, Ryan Lee, they all hit it right at the beginning of that internet moment when like YouTube, Facebook, and so forth exploded. And those guys capitalized. Maybe there wouldn't be a Joe D if the internet hadn't taken off right when he did, and that Ask Joe blog didn't pop like it did, and, you know, and the ability to write that West Side for Skinny Bastards article on T Nation didn't explode like it did, right? And those things. And again, we have no knock on Joe. Joe's the man, but like timing is a lot of things. So to reproduce Joe, his personality, his charisma, his knowledge set, and the timing that he had, and you also think the networking and connections he was making along the way, it's irreproducible. So young people look at it like, I could do what Joe did. It's like, that doesn't exist anymore. It's different now. You know, it's a little different.
You just named guys that like I would call unicorns, right? It's really hard to replicate what they did based on all those things that you said. And it's like there's a why you just named the charisma, the knowledge, the timing, the positioning on T Nation. They had a lot of things working for them, where today it's like people are banking on going viral off one of those things, right? Like they're either really smart, but that doesn't always lead to virality, or maybe they have an incredible physique. Well, we all realize now there's a lot of people with incredible physiques out there. That's not that much of a differentiator. So you've got to have the charisma, you've got to have the knowledge, you got to be able to produce value. And then you also have to really understand the mechanics of marketing. It's not just about, you know, 3 posts a day. You know, like you mentioned, Luke, I watched him. I remember when he said, I am going to grow my following, and the intentional steps that he took. But if he wasn't really good and he didn't have a depth of knowledge to pull from, it wouldn't have gone anywhere, right?
So he's also an incredible presenter. And people don't realize how hard that is to get up in front of a room full of your peers and present in a way that literally captivates people and excites people. That's not an easy thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've known him for, I don't know, 13 years or so now. And I remember going to like old events at his gym.
Yeah.
Rebs were doing stuff. And if I look at his, like the way he presented then to like who he is now, it's unbelievable. So not only did he do the work, and there's a lesson in this for everybody, it's like, it's not just doing the work, it's getting better at the work that's required for you to grow. And you have to put in the time in order to do that, and
For sure.
that's not as sexy and cool. Everybody thinks they're just going to, do 3 posts a day, run some ad revenue towards some video, and they're going to blow up and they're going to make 30 grand a month. And that's just not true. In fact, I think most trainers, like the examples that you gave right there, those people should have came and worked for you for years and then went out and built their brand because of the stability it would have provided, the network it would have created, the access they have, the things they need to learn how to do a better job of. And this is the thing that I'm seeing now is I want to, like you guys did that train the trainers thing, which off this podcast, I want to talk to you a little bit more about, because like I said, I want to own my market, right? And part of that is we're very welcoming. We want all trainers to come to our area. And I was talking to a guy that has a good following at a big box gym here about like, would trainers be interested in coming and learning the craft of coaching? And he was like, man, I'm gonna be honest with you. If it doesn't include social media, you're gonna have a hard time getting people there. And it was so deflating because I was like, you got to be kidding me. He was like, dude, I'm telling you, all these people think they know. They all got their tripod. They all got their manicured channels, but they're not that good at coaches. And you would think they'd recognize that, but they don't. And that's a scary thing,
Yeah, I mean, it is a weird thing because there's always the bell curve. There's always the 10% rule, right? So I've met some incredibly talented, motivated, young, let's call them, under 30s that are going to be the next generation of exceptional coaches, right? But I would say the bulk of people in the middle are this generation of young coaches who just want to come in and do all the sexy stuff and be known for something long before they've ever created any real credibility, sustainability, and a brand within themselves. And look, my brand is the athletes and adults hanging on our walls and the successes they've had. It's not my degree. It's not my certifications. Like all that stuff is great to open a door and start a conversation. But most of the accolades that, let's call it, is the legacy of Varsity House and Coach Joe is the thousands of people who've walked through the door and seen, a great benefit from working with us, right? That comes from, tens of thousands of hours of standing on the gym floor and having, to ad lib, create solutions, one day, and again, like, I'm just using a small example, but like I got this amazing workout plan for my football players, and I come in and I find out that the coach, mother effed them good at practice that day because they had a bad scrimmage or whatever it is. And it's like, you got to change the whole plan on the fly. You don't know how to do that if you've never been at that moment, literally sweating, trying to look like you know what you're doing, even though you got to fix stuff. And it's like, all right, hey guys, we're gonna warm up over here for a minute. Like I'm like, damn, warm them up quick. I'm gonna change the plan fast. You run over to the whiteboard and try and fix shit up, right? And it's
you
like
created a body of work. Like you created a body of work, and then you reap the rewards of that, those lessons. And I don't think young coaches, and again, like if any young coaches listen to this and you're offended, like toughen up, Buttercup. I'm not talking to you. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably along the way, like you're doing your thing. But it would have been really wise for young coaches to see that mentorship matters. And I can who not how this thing, right? Find the guy that knows all the things that I need to know, go serve and work for that person with 100% effort. And then if I handle the transition right, if you handle it bad, that's not smart, young coaches. But if you handle that transition right, then you want to go out and do your own brand. You are much better suited for that. And you can really even borrow some of the branding from that company, like a trainer who moves on from Boyles or Varsity House or BCI. Like
they've done great.
They've done great, and they're going to have some credibility because of that attachment, to that brand.
I mean, look, you met Adam, and we think he's obviously
he's sharp.
He's fantastic, sharp dude, great at the marketing. He's a good looking dude. So he's got a personality and
Yep.
a persona. He could have easily done his own thing,
Yep.
and he chose to stick it out with us primarily for the knowledge, education, network, and mentorship. And obviously, it got to the point where there were some conversations between us, and I appreciate him always being as open and honest as he has been, to where he had lots of opportunities kind of presenting themselves to him that were outside of the realm of Varsity House. And it just came down to a point, like you said, he had made himself so valuable and had given us the opportunity by sticking with us for the period of time to say, hey, man, like, to lose Adam at this point would be a real detriment to our business. We got to find a way to make him a bigger part of our business. And we did that. We made him a partner in our expansion project
Yep.
and in the personal training studios because, he had, like you said, he was that young coach who had all the dreams of being a social influencer, being training NBA players, but he said, you know what? These guys really got something special here, and I can learn a lot from a couple of guys that are a little bit older, a little bit further along than I am. I'm going to stick it out with them. And then, 2 years turned into 5 years, turned into 7 years. And this year at the 10-year mark, it's like, hey, man, like, we've been doing this a long time together. I think it's time to take this thing to the next level. And here's a guy now we've been able to keep to stay. But a lot of people, they don't want to last 10 days. They don't want to last 10 weeks. It's like, they're more interested in moving on. A great piece of advice, because you brought up, is like sticking with something and working for a few years. I think that's the true when it comes to, like, I don't know, even books, authors, right? Mentors, right? Like, people ask me all the time, like, we've been with Vince for a long time now, right? And I've been with lots of other, we did, a strategic coach for a while. We've done
Okay.
some other mentorship programs, right? And I always try to ride it to the bottom of the rabbit hole and like do a lot of it, right? And like with Vince, it's like, I'm sticking out. Why? Because the more I stay, the more status I get within the group, the more I learn, the more influence I have, the more it reciprocates, right? If you're somebody who's bouncing from group to group a lot, bouncing from authors to authors, right? And even in, like, I kind of use it like training. If you're bouncing from training methodology to training methodology, you usually just got a big pile of mud, right?
Yep.
And when somebody asks me like, oh, who should I read? Like, what book should I read on marketing? I always tell everybody to read Donald Miller. He's my favorite. I like him personally. I met him personally when I was in his mastermind. Ride that to the bottom of the rabbit hole, and you'll know more about marketing than you ever need. But if you read 16 different methodologies and ideologies on marketing, you come back to zero at the end because you're all confused.
That's such
You
a
know?
good point right there. That is a really big thing. And it kind of, once you accumulate a vast amount of knowledge, it can actually make you more indecisive because
Yeah,
you understand all the context and gray area around things. So I do think plugging yourself into one thing at a time and then moving on from there makes a ton of sense.
for sure.
Before I forget, I want to, so your story about Adam
Mm.
is how it should be done, right? For him to have the courage to have those conversations and for you guys to have the integrity to bring him in. Well, I'll tell you a cautionary tale. I had a young guy who worked for me for some years, and he was the guy that I was positioning to be the guy. He was a little impatient and got a little loose with his lips. There was a couple operational things. We'll just say he forged commissions and put me in a really tough space. When I confronted him, he chose to lie. Instead of doing the right thing, paying his dues, he would have been ascended to the top of my company. Okay. I had to fire him. I had to let him go. Within months, I got calls from 3 NBA strength coaches who I had introduced him to. They called me and said, hey, he's applying for a job here. How are things going? And I said, well, he didn't put down that he was fired, I assume. And I didn't crap on the kid, but I told the truth. And he didn't get those jobs.
Yeah.
So when you're working inside somebody else's organization, even if you have aspirations to do your own thing one day, there's nothing wrong with that. But how you respect that business and how you respect that owner, and if you want to be a bigger part of it, having the courage to approach them and talk about, like, what does that look like?
Yes.
That's a big thing. And a lot of young coaches, I don't think have the courage to do that. They're afraid of being maybe marginalized for it, but I think that's a mistake. I think you got to
look. Integrity is at an all-time low in humanity, right? So I think it's still super common for trainers to bounce. We had it happen to us not too long ago. We had a trio of guys working for us, and they kind of all formed a little coup, and one left, and we got rid of one, and the other two kind of left, and they knowingly stole some clients from us and like did it in a shady kind of way, right? And these were guys that worked with us, and they were, again, we had high potential. A couple of them we thought were going to be really, really great, and one of them in particular we thought could be one of our next facility leaders. Like, he had very, very good coaching skills, and he was a very likable human being, but he got trapped up in the little trio of stupidity that I like to call it with his buddies. And when he left in a less than honorable, like, let's call it a less than honorable discharge, right?
Yes.
And to this day, if he were to use us as a reference, like you said, like, I would not lambaste him, but I would tell them the truth. And I would say, hey, look, this is what happened. He left, less than honorable with a lack of integrity, and clearly, made some missteps. And that's just the way it goes. We always say to everybody, it's like, hey, if you decide to leave, it's better that you just come and confront it, say it, speak it, and we leave with a handshake and a hug and a high five and saying, damn, we're going to miss Andy, man. He was really good. That stinks. Look, the best thing that could have happened, there's two roads. It's either Adam's leaving and he's going to open up his new training facility, and we're really excited for him, and we're going to miss Adam. He was awesome. Shit, it's going to be hard to replace him. But we're super excited for his new opportunity and his new thing. Or we're going to keep this guy, and like we did, and we're going to keep him in. And then the third option is obviously he burns the bridges, and it's like, now we hate each other, and it's like, you can never use each other for references and so forth. So great lesson there, definitely. And and I think it's just perspective, right? These 22-year-olds don't know how their 32-year-old self is going to be affected by that one decision. And I think that's really a great perspective. Hey, so let's talk a couple tactics, and I got a couple quick fire kind of questions for you to talk a little bit more specific business tactics, and just to kind of give the people that are listening some quick hitters to wrap it up. So right now, you said you've made the switch primarily to adult training. What's your best marketing offer right now? What's your front end offer look like, and what's your best marketing attraction piece right now for adults?
Man, I'm going to give this one away. This is I think a lot of people, I don't think have the courage to do this, but we've used this last year to, I think, net 60 new adult clients. So I was really against the 6-week challenge thing for a long time. So one, we created a 6-week challenge based around the principles that we believe in. And we came up with an accountability system and just a product that we're really proud of. But you guys use the black card, the golden ticket type of deal.
Yep.
So what we started doing,
giant stack of them right here.
So, a lot of people know about the black card, or I always attribute it to kind of the old, I think it's a Kennedy thing, the golden ticket, right? Yep. So I was thinking, like, we just need more bodies in here. Yes, I would love to use the Hormozy method of getting a high ticket amount up front, and what do they call it? Client financed acquisition or whatever. Never worked well for me. So what we did is we sign people up, and if it's a new client or an existing client, we give them a black card to be able to give to a friend to do the challenge for free. We convert 93% of those people or better. So I am giving up 6 weeks of training, but I am blowing them away in 6 weeks. 2 weeks in, we've got a fast action upgrade that they can do. The vast majority of them jump in at week 2, but having the courage, and I didn't want to give away more free stuff, but what really worked well for me when I was younger and I first started was doing free work, and everybody's afraid to do that.
It's amazing to me too. I did all these free speed sessions, and no wonder I wound up getting team contracts with all those teams. But now it's like, I don't do shit for free.
Yeah, it's crazy. Every time we run a challenge, it seems to be 70, 80 people, kind of in that range. And then we end up converting the vast majority of those people into either our small group training program, which we call hybrid training, or our metabolic blast program, which is our large group metabolic training program. So that, I would say, has been the most successful acquisition tactic on the adult side of things.
Awesome, man. That's great. And do you run that challenge more than once a year?
Yeah, we run it 3 or 4 times a year. So
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we only do
Yeah.
ours twice. We run 2 mini programs, but that's been our best adult acquisition program as well. For now, this will be, we're just about, we're 2 weeks away from starting our 26th transformation. So this will be
Okay.
13 years of doing this twice a year. It's made us at this point probably close about $5 million in total
Wow.
revenue sales. So you look at the residuals of all the people it's brought in. So great acquisition. Now, what about athletes? Let's switch focus there. What about athletes? Now, I know you're much more stable in the community. So how are you still getting athletes, attracting athletes, and specifically for those who do team training? Like, how do you garner some of those team contracts?
So yeah, that I'll share that. So I left teams alone for a decade.
Mm-hmm.
I did have two contracts at two high schools where I was actually the strength coach. So
Mm-hmm.
at that point, I didn't really want to work with any schools. And this is a very kind of cliquish area anyway. Like if you work with one school, people don't want to come to you, just weird stuff like
Sure,
that.
sure.
But we started to get a lot of requests from teams, specifically baseball and basketball. But now it's spun into softball, volleyball, soccer, tennis, even, where what we do is we call it a program install. We will come out, we will meet with your coach, see what type of equipment that you have. And then we will get an idea of what does that coach want, try to loosely evaluate the team and any other specificity we might need to include into this. And then in this program install, we charge a flat program design fee. It could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000, depending on the school, the budget, size. And then we bill out sessions at $200 a session. We generally recommend, and we only do this for like 3 weeks. So it'll be 3 weeks at 3 times a week at $200 a session, plus the install fee. That gets us in front of everybody. We have a strategy to basically collect all the email addresses from those kids as well.
Mm-hmm.
But now we've got all their contact information and we continue to market to them on the back end. So like right now, we've got 3 basketball installs coming up. So as soon as one
And
finishes,
the goals to have a short-term program installed, meet with the coaches, the athletes, the parents, and get everybody on the program, and then they take the wheel from there.
It from there. And it's usually done at 12 weeks at a clip. So we'll build it for 12. At about week 10, we start having conversation about the next block, and then we come in and repeat that process.
Do you come in periodically throughout the 12-week program to do a drop-in or a check-in?
If time permits or if a coach asks.
Okay.
And depending on the coach and the travel, because we got some schools that are 30 minutes away.
Folks, this is a perfect example of learning something here. It's like the golden goose. For us, we've committed a lot of time and energy to team training in the past, and we kind of moved away from it because of I don't want to train a team for $200 3 times a week for 13 weeks, but I'll do it for 600. I'll do it for $900 or $600 a week for 3 weeks. That's for sure. Yep. So I just learned something new. I'm stealing this. And you're going to be seeing our Varsity House, athlete program install coming near you.
Oh yeah. I mean, do it. I mean, like I said, and we did such a good job with this one basketball, Huntsville High. They were ranked number 14 in the country. They lost in the state championship, but they've got some dudes, and everybody saw the difference in their body. So Bob Jones High School, big 7A high school, and then Buckhorn High School, who has the number 3 player in the whole country for his age group, number 1 player at his position. They just reached out too, and we'll have this kid Caleb Holt, he's on the USA team, and we've had enough of those kids. Like we've had quite a few guys that play pro basketball, and this kid's kind of up next. And then anytime you can get access to one of those kids, we call it the cool kids lunch table, right? In high school, like everybody wants to be at that table, right? So when you start attracting those kids and you start to have influence on those kids, everybody in the community wants to be a part of that too.
No question. We've always seen that. He was in the gym yesterday, and if he listens to the BOS. So if you're listening, Jordan, I apologize. I didn't get a chance to come down and say hello, but Jordan Fuller was in the gym yesterday with Dan. He just got traded to or he just signed a new contract with the Charlotte Panthers, Carolina Panthers, and he's such a great guy, and he's so locally known in the facility that when he comes in, he does such. Jordan Fuller. He was just on the Rams for the last 4 years, right?
We need to connect him with. We got a guy in the gym right now named LeBrian Ray that played at Alabama. That's with the Panthers too, a defensive end.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. He's such a great kid. And I always appreciate the fact that when he comes back to the gym, he usually hangs out, signs autographs, like talks to the kids. He's just a really
Really.
good dude. And you look at that, like, but you said that traction, having a couple of those cool kids really, brought up the level of interest in a sense in the gym for sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's helped us a ton. I mean, if you look in our gym, we've got, 6 racks. In between each rack is an NFL jersey of a local player,
Yep.
grew up in our program, who's now in the NFL or was in the NFL. And
Awesome.
LeBron's one of those kids. He started coming to us at like 10 years old, and now he's in the NFL. And he comes back and trains. And yeah, so that was a big thing for us in football, especially when I was doing all the coaching. So it was very easy to get football players in.
Yes.
Without me doing a lot of the coaching, we don't see as many football athletes, but we've got traction in basketball, baseball, softball, which hurts my heart a little bit. And one day we'll go back and capture some of the football market. But
same. When Dan
right?
and I were on the gym floor all day, every day, we had stacked from from little kids all the way to the NFL. Like in our summer program, we would have 60, 70 college athletes, and literally could be a dozen NFL players training with them in the summertime. Now, Adam's in charge. Adam, not as much of a football guy, didn't have the connections into football. We got a lot more basketball guys. He's more an NBA guy, got some good connections there. So a lot more basketball guys. Like you said, more females than ever. Like right now, we have the most females. And it's funny though, our director of performance right now is a woman, right? Alex, who she was a longtime athlete who trained with me since she was 12, went to school, did a degree, was a 5-year captain starter at Rhode Island, great softball player. And she came back, kind of got inspired by what she did with us and wanted to become a coach. And now she's been working for me for a few years and just became like our, director of performance under Adam. And you go figure, here's a female in charge of your athlete program for the last year. And it makes sense that our softball population has quadrupled, right? Because that's where she knows and what she loves the most. And then just the overall female population has more than quadrupled. So, so it really is the who's in your business. We go all the way back to the first minute of our conversation. The people that you have are really the lifeblood of your business. They are the culture and the heartbeat of the company.
Yes.
So choose wisely.
And
all right, one more tip.
Go ahead. Let me say one more thing, because I think this is important for somebody to hear. If you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of revenue to pay people really well, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still be searching out people to employ, but you got to bring to the table a lot more than the job offer. And one of the things that I talk about when you just started is, what is the impact you're going to have in this person's life? Because there are a lot of young coaches that need mentors. And if you can be that person as you build your business to build the revenue to pay them the way that I'm sure you would want to pay them, there's some real virtue in that, too. So don't be afraid to invest in somebody outside of the X's and O's.
Yeah, no. And I think one of the, he doesn't give me too many, but one of the best compliments Dan's ever given me was that, I hired Joe to be my strength coach, but I didn't realize that I didn't realize that I was getting a lifelong mentor, friend, and that he was going to be my business partner. Right. And it's like the conversations that I had with Dan went far beyond training, because at that moment in Dan's life, when he came to me for training at 19 years old, it wasn't to train. I said, bro, you're strong, you're powerful, you're 300 pound, you're a 300-pound fucking wrecking machine. I said, it's what's between here that's not connecting the dots. And it's your friend circle, it's your nutrition, it's your mindset towards your lifestyle and where you spend your time and energy. And we cleaned that stuff up, and we didn't really do too much of the training, because at that point, you're a 19-year-old football player. You can pretty much do anything. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. You don't need, you look at weights and you get more jacked. So I think that's been great, man. I love what you're doing. I love where you're at. I love the fact that you're growing. I love seeing it from the outside looking in, and I'm excited to see where this new building goes and the new opportunities goes. And I know, it doesn't even matter. The new building is just an ancillary idea. Once you're like me, once the seed is growing in your brain that we're going to grow, there's no stopping the machine at this point. I know how many gyms we're going to do. Dan tells me not to tell anybody because it gets people freaked out. I said, but I said, don't worry. I will focus on the first 5, but I know there's way more coming.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much for taking the time, Andy. You're the man. So much to learn. tell people where's the best place where they can find you, the business, and connect with you a little bit more.
Well, number one, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed this and all of our conversations. If you want to find me, probably the best place to find me is on Instagram. It's Andy McCloy _BCI. I'm not always on there, but I'm pretty easy to reach if you shoot me a DM. And if anybody wants to shoot me an email, it's Andy McCloy at bodycreationsinc.com. That's probably the best ways to get a hold of me.
And one last little tidbit, we'll leave a little golden nugget for all the people out there listening, those young coaches, or even those of you who are seasoned veterans that see people like myself and Andy, but for some reason just don't reach out. Almost every great connection that I've ever made in the industry and outside came from me just saying, fuck it, let me just shoot this guy an email or shoot him a DM. And most people who are good business people are always looking to help and are willing to help. So, shoot him an email, give him a call. If you do nothing, you get nothing. So the worst that he could say is, hey man, I don't have time this week, but we can hook up next week. You know what I mean? It's the really, the worst he could say is no,
Yeah,
so
I'm always
that
down.
email.
Yeah.
You got it. So thanks to Andy McCloy. Thank you so much. This is the Business of Strength. We'll see you next time.